Time.
Good evening and welcome to the August meeting of the North Platte Public Schools Board of Education. Roll call, Sheila.
Mark Nicholson.
Present.
Matthew Peterson.
Present.
Skip Altick.
Present.
Joanne Lengreen.
Present.
Ivan Mitchell.
Present.
Angela Blazey.
I would move to excuse Angela Blazey.
Roll call, Sheila.
Matthew Peterson.
Aye.
Skip Altick.
Aye.
Joanne Lengreen.
Aye.
Ivan Mitchell.
Aye.
Mark Nicholson.
Angela is excused. The Nebraska Opens Meeting Act legislates the methods by which public meetings are conducted. Information pertaining to this act is posted on the back wall of the boardroom. If you would, those of you that can, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First, we will start with our communications. Foundation report, Terry.
Good evening, Board of Education. Thanks for having the Foundation report again this evening. The Foundation would like to thank those that were able to attend the Bulldog Weekend events, after hours and the Bulldog Golf Classic that were a couple weekends ago. About 28,000 were raised. We're still working on expenses and those kind of things, but the numbers are looking really good. The Bulldog Golf Classic was a joint venture with the High School Booster Club so that the money would be split 50-50. We had 34 teams. We were trying to raise money for the boys and girls golf team to have indoor practice time out at the new building at Lake Maloney. And there was a generous donor that stepped up and made a great contribution to the lake project, contingent that the boys and girls golf team at North Platte High School get 20 years of practice time.
Wow.
So as soon as I get more information on that, I will pass that on to the appropriate people and hopefully be able to share their name and give them some spotlight. Education after hours, it was great to see some retired educators. I want to thank Dr. Rhodes for pinch hitting, maybe having about 30 minutes to get up and talk. Mr. Millsap, Mr. Martin, Mrs. Byrne, Mr. Best were all in attendance along with several other retired educators. The auction itself raised over 12,000 and there was over 130 in attendance. So again, thank you. Zeller Motors won the auction for the North Platte High School driveway, so we don't have to change the sign there. So very excited about that. And then we're gearing up for back to school. We have 180 employees so far participating with the Pay Green to Wear Blue campaign. So thank you for allowing that. And of course, we're gearing up for Homework Club that will start in September. And of course, mark your calendars. September 30th is the backyard barbecue competition and your very own Dr. Rhodes will be one of the judges. So if you know of anyone that wants to have a team, have them reach out to me. Any questions for me? Great.
No, thank you very much, Terry. Dr. Rhodes.
So once the calendar turns to August, school districts get fairly busy. So just a few things to report. The last week of July, on Monday, the 25th, we had our ADCO retreat. So that would be all district level administrators along with our building administrators. And that was a full day of kind of a business meeting and learning in the morning. And then we really did some team building in the afternoon. It was a great day. Administrator days followed that week, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I believe we had all building administrators and most of our district administrators who attended administrator days in Kearney. That Wednesday is always the Department of Ed's day. And so we usually hear from the commissioner, and then there are several breakout sessions. I know our administrators attended many different breakouts that the department put on. There were several on the teacher shortage that were quite interesting, as well as career academies, you know, two areas that we have some focus on. And then, of course, Thursday and Friday are breakouts that are put on by the Nebraska Council of School Administrators. So a lot of learning went on for those 2.5 days. Wednesday, August 3rd, we welcomed 30 new teachers to the school district. And so you're going to hear a little bit about teacher induction later on in our board meeting. A great group of educators that kind of run the gamut. I believe 11 of those, I'm looking at Mr. Mills, 11 of those are brand new teachers entering the profession. And you're going to, again, you'll hear about mentoring and some of those things. So it was a really, really busy day for those new teachers. Also a really busy time for our district level administrators as well, as they were presenting a lot of information to those folks. So we're excited to have that new group. Of course, tomorrow is our all staff opening. We'll be at Bauer Field. We'll have a breakfast that starts about at 7:15, and then we'll have Mrs. Purdy and our choir will start performing at 8:15. Speaking will start about 9, and we'd love to have board members there as well. Board workshop is set for a week from today. On the 15th, we'll begin at 10. We have Marcia Herring coming out from NASB, and she'll present the first part of that workshop. That will be in the HDC. We will be in the HDC for that. And then, of course, that's an important week for us too, as we bring kids back in our buildings and we're opening up buildings. Our K through 9 students, their first day of school is Monday, the 15th, and then our 10th through 12th grade their first day is on Tuesday, that 16th. So we're really excited to get kids back in our buildings. One of the things that Mr. Simpson and I have done for about the last month is we've visited district buildings across, both from a maintenance and storage, and then of course our school buildings as well. And really what that was about, I think for me, was getting eyes on the footprint of those facilities and almost kind of a facility audit in the back of my mind. And we talked about future projects and of course current projects that we have going on right now. So we have conducted all those building visits. Those are finished at this point. Today was the first day for fall activity practice, with the exception of our football team. They have a 0-week game, so they actually started last Monday. And so we have those activity practices going on as well. Just a few more items here. The State Board of Education meeting was this past Friday. One of the things that I picked up from that is they did vote in the affirmative to hire a consultant. That consultant is American Institutes for Research. And basically they're going to examine the process that the state board uses in writing academic standards. And of course, that has a lot to do with how the health standards were rolled out. So that consultant firm will provide a report to the state board. I believe it's next May is when they'll provide that. So we'll keep our eyes on that as the state board meets. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this, just a huge shout out to Lori Coburn and her staff of maintenance and custodial. It takes a great deal of work to get buildings ready to open for our teaching staff and our students, and they've just done an absolutely wonderful job. So I wanted to make sure that I acknowledge them. Any questions for me? Thank you.
All right, board comments.
So I just had a couple.
Go ahead.
So with sports, fall sports practices starting today, I had an opportunity to visit with one of the coaches, and they are reporting that they may have record numbers going out for a sport again, which I think is great. We saw a little bit of that last year and maybe even the year before with some of our sports. And so I'm hoping that we're seeing numbers up across the board. And of course, with that comes some challenges potentially, but it'll be exciting to see what we do with that moving forward. So, and then the other thing I wanted to mention is I took opportunity to take the wild card book home, and I've seen the End of You book by Dr. Warren, and the wild card, I just kind of flipped through it. I'm going to look at it in a little bit more detail, but it looked like it had some really fun suggestions in there for teachers and administrators. And I've seen the End of You book. I can barely put it down. So it's been a really good book. So I'm looking forward to our speaker tomorrow. So.
Okay, good.
I did have the opportunity to attend the Education After Hours event the foundation put on. So Terry, you and your board did a wonderful job. I heard a lot of positive comments. It was, I think, a different fundraiser than a lot of people put on in town. And so I think people appreciated that and kind of the unique aspect of it. And so they put a lot of work in, and it sounds like they raised a lot of good money. So good work.
I was fortunate enough to attend the new teachers meeting last Wednesday. I always enjoy that. And looking out at the group, 3 things that I took away from that, and Dr. Rhodes talked about some of that. Number 1 was the good mix between veteran teachers and new teachers that I thought was really good. The other area that I also really enjoyed was seeing that we had some former North Platte High grads who are now back teaching with us, like several of the others. And everybody looked so enthusiastic, a little scared, but enthusiastic. And that is really what we want. So hopefully that will be the same way tomorrow when our veteran teachers return at Bauer Field, and we'll get the year started with everyone. Okay, committee reports. On August 2nd, 2022, meeting of the Personnel, American Civic, Curriculum, Student Services, and Communication Subcommittee. Mark.
So the meeting began at 7:58. Skip Altig, myself, Dr. Rhodes, Mr. Mills, Mr. Simpson, Mrs. Douglas, Officer Johnson, and Mrs. Busher were all in attendance. We opened up with a presentation from Ms. Douglas on the 2022-2023 Tier 1 goals, which I'll be presenting here tonight at the meeting. We also got a report on the new teacher induction program. Sorry about that. And she will also be presenting that again here tonight at the meeting. We got a nice safety and security report from Officer Johnson and Mrs. Busher. They'll be providing more information tonight at the meeting once again. Mr. Mills gave us a staffing update with some pretty good news, I'll say. I got a Spanish teacher. Dr. Rhodes gave us a report on the ADCO retreat and the administrator days. And then Mr. Simpson provided us with updates on the repairs at Adams Middle School and North Platte High School in terms of HVAC at Adams Middle School and the skylight at North Platte High School. And we adjourned at 9:10.
Just a point of clarification, the Tier 1 goals will be presented at the September board meeting.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you. August 4th, 2022, meeting of the Finance, Facilities, Operations, and Legislation Subcommittee. Ivan.
Thank you, Skip. Myself, Stuart Simpson, Matt Peterson, Joanne Lundgren, and Todd Rhodes were all there. We began at 7:59. As every month, we talked about the budget, and we reviewed the one-page budget document that will be shared and went through that and other information to support our 2022-2023 budget. And it'll be monitored in August, final numbers coming out at the end of the month. A big part of the budget is the property valuations. And so we went through that, seeing a 7% increase in valuations for North Platte schools. The certified valuations, so the finalized numbers, will be available to us on August 20th. And that led into a discussion of the budget timeline. There's legislation out there that we refer to as the postcard legislation that we discussed that timeline, and we do that in conjunction with the county. And then we set the budget hearing date for August 29th at 5:30. Then we went into a discussion of the ESSERS funds. These are the COVID relief dollars that are given to the educational institutions, ESSERS 2 and ESSERS 3. In the last year, we actually increased the budget quite a bit to allow for the expenditure of those funds because they have to be spent in a certain time frame. You will see the budget numbers go down this year as a lot of that money has been spent, and we will have the remaining ESSERS 3 dollars to spend. And then we went through the different construction projects that we had. Any of you know that are running any capital projects, it's been difficult to get equipment in and to find the staff to take care of the projects that are out there. But I'm very impressed with what the district has been able to do to keep the projects as close as they can to their timelines. And it looks like we'll be in good shape by the time school starts. And we adjourned at 9:01.
All right. Now is our consent agenda. Our adopted rules of parliamentary procedure, Robert's rules, provide for a consent agenda listing several items for approval of the board by a single motion. Most of the items listed under the consent agenda have gone through board subcommittee review and recommendation. Documentation concerning these items has been provided to all board members and the public in advance to assure an extensive and thorough review. Items may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any board member. Along with this is the approval of financial claims and reports. And Ivan and Matt, I believe you two did this month's audit.
Correct? Yep. Everything seemed to go well.
Very good.
Okay. All right.
I would move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Roll call, Sheila.
Skip Baltic,
Aye.
Joanne Lynn Green.
Aye.
Ivan Mitchell,
Aye.
Mark Nicholson,
Aye.
Matthew Peterson.
Aye. It is approved. All right, reports and discussion items, safety and security report. Mrs. Busher and Officer Johnson.
Good evening. Don't want to talk too loud this time. So good meeting. I'm glad to be here tonight to give you a little update on some of our security procedures throughout the district. And then Mrs. Busher will provide what her office also does in that retrospect. First thing I will talk about is we do use the standard response protocol in the whole district. Standard response protocol is how we are going to respond to various incidences and the action that's taken within those buildings. On an annual basis, we do train all of our staff and students on an annual basis. So as our students are moving into the schools this year, here within the first couple of weeks, Mrs. Busher and I will be going around the schools and teaching the kiddos that, and also the teachers. Along with that, we also, all first responders here in town and the 911 center has also been trained in that method. So that way, if they do have to respond, whether it's fire or police, we're all on the same page. We use the same language going across. If we know what's going on inside the school just by the language that's used. So the next thing that we do use is the standard reunification method. So if we're in an unfortunate event where we'd have a mass incident at one of our schools and we had to reunify our students back to their parents, we do have a plan on board with that. We are up to date. This year, we do need to visit that as far as our safety committee and look at those procedures and conduct that training again. We do that about every other year and we'll do with that for this year. One of the systems that we do use in all of our schools is called Raptor. I would believe that many of you are familiar with that, along with everybody that might be hearing this. It's when you come into the school buildings, you got to present identification, and it's entered into Raptor. It's how we do our visitor passes and guest permits within our buildings. When people are run through that system on a national database that does check for sex offenders, what is nice about that system is we can manually enter individuals that either we have banned from property or that we do have significant safety concerns of. So that way, if any of those individuals enter our buildings, the building administrator and myself are notified immediately. Without a phone call, we just get that message on our phone. Another system that we use, this is primary in the secondaries and in Madison. It's called Rave Alert. This is our mass notification system. We'll be doing a test on this actually later this week here around 1 o'clock. This system is pretty good. If we have a significant incident in any of our buildings, a teacher can grab their phone, hit one of the emergency buttons, and it notifies everybody inside that building at the same time. It also notifies key personnel within the district, whether it be superintendents or other individuals. Obviously, a system like that increases our response time when we're talking about time barriers if somebody was to do something evil against us. So One of our reporting system is we do have See Something, Say Something. That's an application that can be used by our students. We have posters up in our secondaries and Madison. It's an anonymous reporting hotline. They can use their cell phones. They can either call a number, text a number. They can upload pictures to this, and it is 100% anonymous. We get notified once those come into the buildings, and that way it's kind of a system we can kind of monitor if kids are hearing things, or they can provide a safe way to telling us anonymously that they can use that system. Something more recent, and I think it was the last time I was here, it was for the emergency operation plan. That was a very big bundle of our emergency response and procedures here in the district that graciously the board approved a few months ago. That has been implemented in the school district. Superintendent Dr. Rhodes has agreed to move that forward. We signed those paperwork so that we're going to be in effect again this year. Along with the emergency operation plan, the principals are currently working on their building safety plans. That is required by statute. If you remember, the emergency operation plan is a set of guidelines and protocols and procedures that we set as a district for all employees to follow. But then on top of that, the building safety plans are building specific to that principle. So that way we can identify certain students that may need help in an emergency. And we have all of our evacuation plans, and they're all individualized by building. What we do, one of the things we use at the high school that has been very, very helpful, especially for me, keeping the building secure, is we do a one entry exit at the high school, as you guys are well aware, during school hours, and all exterior doors at the high school are alarmed. So that way, if we do have a student that would go out one of those doors, prop the door, open the door for somebody else, or anything for those reasons, a loud alarm goes off, alarm panel in the front office goes off, and then building administrators and myself received a text message of that alarm. And we've kind of made it a deal between the administrators and I in the past in this new administration that when that alarm goes off, one of us will go to that door and physically check it, while another one of us will check the cameras, because we know that time is important with incidents like that. But I can tell you, after installing those alarms on the doors, we've had them for about 3 years now, and it's virtually stopped all prop doors at the high school. Safety is on the mind of all of us, all staff. They take it seriously, even going around the buildings. Teachers feel free to communicate with me about building safety. I think it's always on somebody's mind. So I like that people are willing to talk about it. But in addition to that, we do have our safety steering committee. We meet on a monthly basis. Prior to us meeting, we get with all the principals, see if they have any input for that meeting. And then when we have the meeting, we go around to one building every month with one of that building administrator so they can partake in the building and share any of their concerns. And we kind of individualize some of our safety plans based on that. It also keeps us up to date with all the buildings where we do have security concerns. Next that we'd be talking about is going to be Gaggle, and I'll leave that for Mrs. Busher.
Okay, hello. So Officer Johnson talked a lot about physical safety. I think we'd be amiss to not talk about mental health and how we're addressing some of those other safety issues when we have students who are struggling. So we have a program called Gaggle. It's actually a twofold program. The first part is it monitors students' devices. So if we, that's great. So if we maybe students are sending threatening emails or searching something inappropriate, we have filters that alert us of those things. And then the second part of Gaggle is we have a telehealth therapy service. So we've discussed this before, but we've identified in our community sometimes we have amazing mental health professionals, but they have a wait list. Sometimes it's really hard to get kids in, especially on an emergency basis. So as a bridge service, we have Gaggle telehealth, so we can get a kid in to see through telehealth, a licensed mental health therapist, and they can even do some assessments if we feel like they're struggling. And on top of the threats, if we come across a threat on Gaggle, we do have a threat assessment process that is now in our student handbook that kind of encompasses several different elements, but it involves home visits, meetings with parents. We work closely with our county attorney and licensed mental health professionals to help us assess threats and make sure that we're doing what we need to do to help students and to keep students safe. The other thing, just briefly, when we talk about student safety, sometimes we forget about students being safe in their home. And I think another important thing that we also do is with our new teachers this week, we trained them all on mandatory reporting. We trained them all on child abuse, what to look for, signs, and ways they can report child abuse. So I think that's also important when we talk about student safety, that we talk a lot about that with our teachers. And I think we have created a culture in our buildings where teachers do feel comfortable making reports if they suspect something's going on. We just made it under the 10-minute mark. Any questions?
I have a couple.
Go ahead.
Okay, so one of the questions I had, I was talking, and this was a few months ago with my kids, and apparently with the SRP, and this is nothing that you guys necessarily control because this is a nationwide, basically, program, right? But one of the things that I understand is that there's been a terminology change or two. And so sometimes I know we had a patron in here a couple of months ago being maybe a little bit critical of the board and, that we're not talking enough about safety and security. And so just went home and talked about some things. And this was one of the things that came up that is maybe a little bit of a challenge. And then sometimes communicating those changes to everyone can sometimes be a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, so I appreciate your question. And I have an example of how this has worked very well. And then I'll answer as far as the change. SRP is something that's being used across the nation, especially in this area. And what I really like it is simply that it's standardized. And an example that I have is a few years ago, we invited Scottsbluff and Gering to play soccer here at our football fields. During that event, unfortunately, police ended up in our pursuit, and the suspect shot several rounds at the police while he ran to a house that was right next to the school. When that happened, I was notified at home, and I notified through our standard response protocol, I notified those coaches, and even Scottsbluff Gering kids knew what to do. So they just pointed them in the direction and they knew what that response is. So that's really nice. That's the point of the standardized response. So if even our students travel to another school district, and unfortunately, if something would happen and any of those security procedures are spoken, our kids know what to do. So I appreciate that. They did change that language. It used to be called lockout. That is when we just operate normally in the building, but we would obviously lock the exterior doors and we don't allow anybody inside or out of the building. That has been changed to secure. And the reason that language was changed is we also have the term that's called lockdown. So from what I was told, lockout was also getting confused with lockdown. And I can contest that 2 years that we went into a lockdown 1 year because of that. So I do appreciate that they changed that late language. So all staff are being trained that it is secure, and the students will be trained as they come in as this secure.
And then another thing that I wanted to ask about, so with the Raptor, you said that it notifies you and the administrator when someone enters the building who's maybe been flagged that they shouldn't be there. So what does that look like? Well, I guess kind of in framing the question, one of the things that we tried to do a couple of years ago was we tried to pass something through a initiative with the voters that we were going to modify the entrance of the North Platte High School. And I know Jefferson Elementary, I think Buffalo was one of them, and there was one other that I can't remember. And so do you have any concerns, or is that something that you feel like we should still be looking into as far as the way our buildings are configured? And, maybe see if we can address it in a different way. Just because I know with some of the high school teachers, maybe there's always a high school teacher that's sitting there manning that system, correct? And so is there ever a time when maybe a teacher or one of our other buildings where you're located at the high school, that it could be more of an issue if an individual like that got in? Or, what kinds of things are we looking at with that?
Well, I can tell you, just being a security guy, you walk into the buildings, you always have concerns with security here and there, and some of it's structure and some of it's finances. And I've been very proud of the board moving forward, more security initiatives and stuff like that building. With that said, I do have serious concerns with the entryway at the high school. I'm fine with the way it is now, but the way that guests are coming in through the day, that's such a wide and big area, and it's wide open. And our teachers do the best. We don't get anybody that gets by that, but anybody that has ill will intentions can essentially just get through that front door. I prefer some other methods that I would be willing to speak to the board about in a different setting.
Okay. And then my final question is, with the See Something, Say Something, do you feel like that's being used a lot by our students?
I don't. And this is nationally. As you recall, we did have Crime Stoppers in, the school version of that in the high school a few years ago. We're required to have an anonymous reporting. We struggle with participation in general, especially with this age group. But what I do appreciate is, and Mrs. Busher can probably contest too, is we have students that, they approach us, and I'm confident that some serious things that we'd have, if the right people knew, they would notify us. We've tried to encourage more participate in that anonymous application, but we're dealing with some teens, so I think there's some trust issues and a whole array of things. So.
Okay, thanks.
I'm willing for more, or a different type of reporting system, but in my experience, I think we'll struggle with that too.
Just a couple of comments. I didn't realize that all the doors at the high school now have alarms on them, which I think is great. I may or may not have been guilty a time or two of using those music and shop doors to prop open and run out to my car. So I think it's great that's in place now. And just overall, I just want to thank both of you. I know that, you both, it's clear that, you both love these kids like they're your own. And so I just know that, obviously there's things we can always do to probably improve, but as far as what we have in place now, I feel confident that we have a lot of good measures in place that are going to keep our kids safe. And that's what's the most important thing. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I have a comment. You had a 10-minute discussion there, but I know you could have probably talked all evening about all the things that we actually do and have been doing for numerous years on safety since the late 90s. So I appreciate all the work that you go into, all the work that both of you do, plus the other people that are involved with the safety to keep our students secure.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Next up, staffing update, Mr. Mills.
Good evening. On July 25th, during our administrative retreat, I received the phone call for our last staff member at 9:05. So very happy to report to the board that we're fully staffed and with our Spanish teacher. The next thing that we talked about last month was nurses. We've hired 2 nurses, so we have those completed. And then a follow-up with paraprofessionals. We had a few of those. I've hired 23 and I have six to go. So we're making a lot of progress on those folks. Questions on staffing?
A para grew a lot since last Tuesday, hasn't it?
Yeah.
That's really good.
Big
Just
time.
kudos on getting that Spanish teacher. I know that's a tough position to fill. So thank you for, I know you've been working hard. So.
Yep.
Well, at a time we're talking about teacher shortages, period, kudos for having a full staff. That's
Right,
impressive.
yeah, it's huge for us. Yeah. Takes a team.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. New teacher induction update, Mrs. Douglas and Mrs. Carlson.
Myself.
Understanding of the inner workings. Professional or technical? This will be led by Bill.
And it will be supported on collective growth. Dual growth. He reviewed spending time. Be happening over the course of the month. I just wanted to. Have any questions?
I have questions. Okay, so first question, I'm just gonna roll this into one question. Well, kind of. Anyway, I wanted to know how the mentors are selected. And then are the mentor mentee, when you pair them, are they in the same building? Are they the same grade level or same subject matter? You know, how do you go about putting those together? Have you ever had an instance where maybe the mentor mentee just aren't meshing? They're just not getting along, you know, it's not working out, and what kind of things do you do to address that?
Administration. building level lead.
Good. Well, I appreciate that you guys provide this for our new teachers. I think it's great. So.
Have we ever gotten any pushback from perhaps experienced teachers who are transitioning into the district and say, I don't need a mentor, or are they receptive to the program still?
I want to thank you for all this work. I can remember the day there never was a mentoring system. And then when we initiated that many years ago, but how it has developed and become something that is very, very good. I think not only for the mentees, but the mentors too. When I did some of that, it opened my eyes, some things that I really hadn't thought about a lot. And so I really appreciate all the help that we do give all the new teachers, whether they're veterans or whether they're brand new. Right. Any other questions? Thank you. Esser's plan update, Mr. Simpson.
Sheila, get the PowerPoint up here so that we can take a look at it. But what we're really doing is just updating the board on our ESSER programs. We've been involved in this for the last few years. And in that, we just want to make sure everybody understands the direction we're going, the requirements that are issued by the federal government, and where our funds stand currently in the district. So you went through that one very well with them without having to tell them. So I'm going to let you go the same way, Sheila. We had 3 different applications, and now the first one we had heard that it was called CARES, but they've modified it for the next 2. So we will refer to all 3 programs as ESSERS. ESSERS 1 was $755,000. We expended all that by the end of the fiscal year 8/31/2022. ESSERS 2, we're currently in the process of expending the 2.8 million, and I'll go through a little bit of what we've been doing. And then finally we have ESSERS 3 of 6.5 million that should be expended by 9/30/2024. There's still debate out there at the federal level if we can extend that period of time, if we're struggling with product, or if we're struggling to get items taken care of. But still, that's out for another couple of years, but we can work on that next year. So I just gave you some definitions so that you're aware of what we referred to on ESSERS 1, 2, and 3, so you can get a familiar, understand what they're saying. But as I mentioned, CARES 1 or ESSERS 1 of 750,000 was expended for protocols to bring staff in so that they understand COVID response, what we needed to do with social distancing. We bought a lot of cleaning products, as well as we hired nurses, tech people, and facilitators to ensure that we were delivering instruction accordingly in the district. We also brought our staff in a day before early, paid them so that we can be prepared for COVID. In ESSERS 2 funding, once again, we continued on with our health assistance for the next 2 years. We have our technology support. Along with that, in ESSERS 2, they identified mental health services, learning loss, and HVAC upgrades. And as we know, we're talking about Adams on HVAC, and learning loss will become a little bit more apparent as we go into ESSERS 3, even though it is addressed in ESSERS 2. ESSERS 2, once again, as we've identified the staffing and Adams construction, we have about 40% of the funds remaining. General fund is sitting at 723,000, dropping down from where we had budgeted previously, and we've gone over that in the finance committee. The building fund has gone from 1.2 down to 427,000. And when we go through the board financial discussion, I'll discuss a little bit more about the remaining funds and where we stand financially in the district with ESSERS 2. So ESSERS 3 came into play in March, and with that, March of 2021. And with that, we had to go through a very extensive process of submitting what we felt we needed to expend the 6.5 million. We will work at getting a lot of our facilities identified, the previous slide, Sheila, in the summer of 2023, and hopefully within 2023, 2024, we will be expending those. Oh, you were right, Sheila. I was wrong. Write that down. Write that down. Next one. Yes, I know.
I think the reason she did so well.
Thank you. Next one. Yeah. Next slide, Sheila. So we have a couple of requirements that we have to meet with ESSERS 3. First of all, is that every 6 months we have to take public comment and input about how we're expending those dollars. And we went out to the public in January, reminded them. We continually remind our public on ESSERS 3 that safe return to the school district is out there. People can go out and comment accordingly, but I'll bring up at the end of the presentation in regards to where they can access that information. But still, public are allowed to enter it. At least every 6 months, we want to make sure we remind them. But after that, every month it's open if you wanted to make a comment. Along with that, when I talked a little bit about learning loss in ESSERS 2 and ESSERS 3, they really tightened up the restrictions in ESSERS 3, and that we have to at least have 20% of our allocation identified toward learning loss, which is really providing intense or high dosage in tutoring or accelerated learning. That can be with our facilitators. That can be with what we're trying to do with instruction in the classroom. So we're working at making sure right now that we have 20% of those identified, and then the remaining 80%, we're working with our cabinet level to make sure that we have everything addressed going in the 23-24 school year. In the plan, we must make sure we engage a meaningful consultation with our stakeholders, which is our students, families, school districts. Also, too, we want to engage our teachers, and we've had that numerous times when we meet with our NPA on a monthly basis. I do discuss with our principals and our cabinet team, as well as our board members, just ESSERS 3 in general. We do try to dress a little bit more on the expenditure side at our finance committee so that we know that where we're standing. So when I talked about the return to school,
we had a fiscal review in June of all of our grants, and they did want to see a little bit on ESSERS 2 and talk about ESSERS 3. But they want to see our return to school plan on our website. In addition to that, we must keep that plan open for anybody to access it through September 30th of 2023. In that, patrons can go out and see the distribution of our funds between, we'll just say, technology, mental health, and learning loss in the district. But we'll continually talk about it, and every 6 months in January and then next June, talk about ESSERS 3, return to school, and then we have met the requirements per the federal guidelines. So with that, on the last slide, on a return to school plan and allocations, it's at nppsd.org. And this is the website that you can go to, or any patron can go to and take a look at our return to school plan.
Okay, questions for Stuart?
Have you gotten much public comment?
We saw a lot of public comment come in January of last year. We went out on Newsmakers, and then we went on a thrill share out to some of our patrons. But when we examined the data that came in, it still aligned with what we had first had to do with our return to school plan. So really, we're staying in alignment with what our patrons are saying in the community for ESSERS 3.
Okay, any other questions for Stuart? Okay, Stuart, monthly financial and budget report.
So as Sheila brings this up, I'm just going to hit the highlight of 4 pages on the full document. You do have the monthly financial report in the consent calendar, so get a little bit more detail. But if you'll go to page 5, Sheila, this is Stuart's report, but really if you focus in on the bond column, that's our bond fund. We currently have $109,000 sitting in there to pay off our Lake Maloney bond, which in December will be $121,000. Looking at our estimated tax payments that still will come in August and then in December approximately. We should have about $33,000 coming in August. So that should cover the difference between the 109 and 121. But I did want to tell you, we should be seeing all the money come in when we close out our fiscal year in August and get our property tax accrued back that we're collecting in August. I will give a better report to the board in regards to where our reserves are standing moving into payment of the Lake Maloney bond. On page 9, our standard cash flow. But actually, we're seeing a better cash flow than we have in the past, and that's probably indicative of our grant payments. The state is doing an exceptional job on getting a lot of our grants submitted and paid more on a timely manner than we've seen in the past. Especially ESSERS 2 that we've done. We've gotten those a little bit quicker. Title I and IDEA are other 2 big areas, and they've been turning those around fairly well. So we're pleased on that. Then page 11. And when you look at this one, this is a little bit different than page 10, which page 10 is from our accounting system. So page 11, what I really want to talk about is, number 1, you can see how much reserves we started with on September 1. But I broke it down between 2 different areas. Number 1, just our regular property tax supported operations, and then our grant supported ESSERS 2 and ESSERS 3 operations, so that you can get a better idea of what's going on. With that, you can see on the property tax side that we're still sitting fairly flush with funds. But in the process, a lot of that has to do with the skylight, and we will be reimbursed from our insurance company for the remainder of this year. ESSERS 2 and 3, we're in the process. I could probably say, and Dr. Rhodes can make a comment also, but about 90% of Adams is complete. But I'll go through, where we stand right now. I could be a little bit off in the percentage, but I know no matter what, school will start. But when I made a comment in regards to how much we're going to budget, number one, I show 453,000 in the building fund. We did receive another 371,000 in ESSERS dollars coming in. So in the process, that drops it down to about 430,000 remaining in the budget. So what I'm saying is that ties back into my PowerPoint in regards to ESSERS 2. So I'm trying to make sure that as we expend the dollars in the grant program of ESSERS 2 and ESSERS 3, that budget for the next fiscal year is reduced accordingly. So with that, we'll just hit one more page. If you can go down to page 14. This is just a revenue comparison over the last 5 years. Obviously, property taxes have come in a little bit better. But as you notice, as I made the comment about grant dollars coming in a little bit quicker and a little bit sooner than anticipated in the past, you can see how much money is coming in from grants. I know ESSERS 2 money is sitting in there, but still, that's a portion of everything coming in. So I do want to update you on construction as we talked about our building fund. I'm going to go through 7 different points. One is that as of this weekend, we had supply air going into our rooms, cooling our rooms so that teachers and students, when they enter the building tomorrow and next Monday, that our rooms will be air conditioned so that they're ready to learn. Along with that, it was interesting for me to understand this, but all of our lighting is in place, but because of the new technology going into place, we have Halls Electric putting in lights that are required by statute that must be programmed differently than we've ever known before. And in the process allows different lighting like in here to be turned on and off with a switch of the button, and the programmer had half of Adams done today. So we're excited to hear about that. Plumbers have been installing both hot water and cold water to all of our new units, 5 new units that went into Adams to complete the instructional wing. All ceiling grid has been up and all areas are padded with tile except the media center. And we knew that would be our last piece, but hopefully AMAX will be here tomorrow or the next couple of days to complete the media center. Along with the media center, all of our subcontractors were staged out of that area. They should be moved out of there today, so that as our custodians have been cleaning behind everybody and all classrooms are cleaned, all furniture has been moved back in, they can now get into the media center and get that ready to go for the start of the school year also. We're still needing, though, in the process, our return air units, which shove fresh air into the units, condition them, and get them back out to the classrooms. Those units need to be installed so that we can then complete the process, which would be to have all units programmed, updated, and balanced so that we can control heating and cooling within that building. And right now, we're working with our architect and the companies to get that taken care of. The last construction that we've had, and everybody knows about this, but our skylight at North Platte High School, and that's, I will call it one of our pinnacles in the building. When you walk into that building, you see natural light coming in there, and it's amazing, and we're continually working at making sure we can get that back in. But just to maybe take a step back, in October, November, we had determined through our insurance company and SGH that our skylight needed to be replaced both on the library and the commons area because of hail damage. With that, June 1st came around. We had SGH out here just surveying the roofs to make sure we're ready, and determined that there were some safety issues over the commons area and what was happening to our curb around the skylight. They were supposed to start on June 28th, but due to product, they postponed it till July 18th, got the library completed, and then pulled off the project as we had issues, safety issues in the commons area that they needed to shore up. Been working with their safety engineer, and we have a plan of action. Dowerhauer will be in on Friday with the steel to and be installed Thursday, Friday, Saturday, so that by the time students come in on Monday, there will not be a safety concern underneath the skylight, so that the high school administration can educate kids. But I do want to send a shout out to Corey. Thank you very much, because he had worked with us on making sure that he can move the students' meals into the gym for the next 2 weeks. He just felt like, for consistency purposes and everything else moving forward, that if we start the students in the gym having meals while they're working on it, whatever the case may be, that we can get that completed. And then finally, August 22nd, they're supposed to be here to install those skylights. Once that was a lot on the finance committee.
Wait until the end of the month at the budget hearing.
Yeah, I know. I'm still not.
Stuart, were you guys able to get in touch with the city about some of the road projects around some of the schools, and if that's going to be a problem?
Not at this point, but we will. I mean, I've been, the Jefferson one and the one over by Adams are the only two that I know about, but we have not got a hold of them at this point in time.
Okay.
Get a hold of us. Yeah.
Stuart, one of the things you mentioned at the subcommittee meeting is about those bond funds, and how, and I hadn't thought about this until you brought it up, but how we have to keep those open for a period of time, because even though we pay off the bond, we're still going to have taxes trickle in late. And those kind of things.
Yeah. So the Lake Maloney bond will still be valid and out there until next time this year. And then based upon how much bond funds coming in, we'll have to have an action item in September to close that bond and move all property taxes collected to the general fund. We're doing that right now with the North Platte High School bond. We still have about, besides the $270,000 that we transferred, about $400 have dribbled in over the course of this year. So we'll wait and see what Lake Maloney does, but we keep those funds open. Obviously we have to, because we're paying off a bond in December, but we'll keep them open and then bring back action in the board meeting. But the county, talking to the county treasurer, that bond just stays out there along with both high school and Lake until at some point in time, if they can discontinue it because they're not getting any more tax collections.
And another option with that bond fund, what some districts will do is they'll leave that bond fund open. And they won't transfer through resolution the total in and close that bond fund account. If they're using foresight and they think they're going to ask for another bond down the road, they'll leave that bond fund open. So statutorily, you can go either way, but Stuart's correct. You'd need a resolution to to transfer those funds into the general fund, and then of course close that bond fund.
So that would be like September of 23, you're talking
Correct.
for the Lake one.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions for Stuart? All right, legislative update.
I know you have some, Skip, but I do want to remind everybody that number one, GNSA will have start the new meeting in September. We'll also hear about it in November at a legislative meeting for GNSA at the state school boards. And then obviously January, we'll start the whole process over again. The other item we've been talking about a couple months, but Governor Ricketts did appoint a replacement for Senator or Congressman Flood now at this point in time. So we'll just see how that progresses. And they're not having a special session.
No, they are not. All right, my legislative committee that I'm on with the school boards met our first time for this coming year on Friday in Lincoln. I'll summarize it. One of the things that did happen that happens every time that the census comes out with when districts change, they move the legislative districts to that you represent. I was District 7, and at that time it encompassed like Kearney, Grand Island, Fremont, Elkhorn. What they have done now is switch them to be more geographic. So now the seat will be District 11, which will encompass mainly West Central to West Nebraska. And there will be one person selected from one of those schools. I think there's like 12 schools or 13 on it. If you want to run, you have to send a nomination into NASB. Then they send those people that want to run to the various schools and we get one vote. So that will be happening because my district disappeared. So if I want to run, I have to run on District 11 now. So we'll see how that goes. Also, they talked about some of the things that they are leery of. We're going to have a minimum of 14 new senators. We could have as many as 27, depending on how the elections turn out. Plus, there will be a new speaker, a new governor, and the committee chairs will be up this year. And so the education committee very likely could get a new person in charge of that. So all of those will be things we'll be watching, but the first thing that they will be really looking forward is who gets elected from which districts in November. And then the committee will meet again in November and at the state convention, and that is after the election. So we have a pretty good idea on how the makeup could be. That's generally what we discussed. I narrowed that down from about a 5-hour discussion there into about 2 minutes. So right now, I probably will run for that District 11 seat because I have the time to attend those meetings. And secondly, I really enjoy it. So any other questions? Okay, time for public comment. Public questions and comments may take place at this time in the agenda. Individuals who want to address the board must complete a guidelines for public comments form with the date, topic addressing, name, address, and the name of any organization you represent and give it to the board clerk prior to the meeting. When called upon by the presiding officer, the individual shall proceed to the table and state his or her name and address. An individual may not exceed 5 minutes, and total time for all individuals who want to speak shall not exceed 30 minutes unless a majority vote of the board approves extending allocated time. This time for public comment shall not be used to address specific individual student discipline or employee performance issues. Complaint and grievance processes are in place to deal with the issues of this nature. Do we have any, Sheila?
Yes, we have the officers of NPEA here.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't know there were 5 of you.
Good evening. Come and introduce ourselves. I am with Oral. I am oh, hi. Sound is good. Okay. I am Liz Odell. I am the secondary co-president. I teach family consumer sciences at the high school. This is my new co-president, Rhonda Wikachea. She is a third grade teacher at McDonald. Over here on my far right, this is Becky Tonight. She is my secretary. Our secretary, I guess. I don't know. She teaches English now at Madison. Lenora Weatherly is our vice president. She teaches music at Adams, and this is our new treasurer, Kim Brandenburg. She teaches SPED at Jefferson. So we just wanted to come and introduce ourselves to the school board, and you will hopefully be seeing us once a month.
Okay.
So.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Sheila?
No.
We do have somebody that I'd like to introduce that I don't think the board has met yet, and that is Mr. Jimmy Rhodes, who is Assistant Principal Activities Director at the high school.
I did have the opportunity to meet him last Wednesday of the new teachers, so. You're welcome. Okay, action items, approved new policy 4064, transporting students in employee vehicles. Dr. Rhodes.
So we do have two policies as action items this evening. Both of these policies went through a first reading at last month's meeting. The first policy is 4064, and that's transporting students in employee vehicles. The basic gist of this policy is, other than students that live in the household of the employee, employees are not to transport students unless it is due to some sort of an emergency. If an emergency exists, that employee needs to, at the best of their ability, contact the parents of that student as well as the administration that they're going to transport them. Now, quite honestly, that probably won't happen ahead of the transportation, but our expectation from our employees would be to contact those parents after, as well as the administration. So if it's an emergency, we certainly want to take care of our kids and keep them safe. This is really a safeguard for our employees as well as the district. Once an employee starts to transport students that are not their own with their own vehicle, that they basically become a driver for the district. And if they haven't had proper training, we have some liability issues.
But there is training if they want to take that.
There's a 2-hour bus training.
Right.
Yes.
Motion.
I would move to approve policy number 4064 as presented.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Discussion.
I assume this is a pretty standard KSB policy kind of across the state.
Yeah, actually, as I perused other
Brandon.
school districts and their agendas, a lot of districts had this on their agendas for approval.
It was one of the main areas that they discussed first in their updates that was held in, was that June?
Yeah, the webinar in June.
Yeah, that it's to protect the people who are driving plus the school districts. And that's why you talked about the training. It's a much bigger issue in some of the smaller schools where it happens all the time when they have long distances, but it's a protection for both the employees and the school. Roll call, Sheila.
Joanne Lynn Green,
Aye.
Ivan Mitchell,
Aye.
Mark Nicholson,
Aye.
Matthew Peterson.
Aye.
Skip Alter.
Aye. It is approved. All right, approve new policy 6037, selection and review of library media Dr. Rhodes.
So again, 6037 went through first reading last month as well. There are really two pieces to this proposed policy. The first is selection for new media into our libraries and what that procedure looks like, what that process looks like. And so we've already begun to talk at the district level what that committee would look like. We have enlisted Mrs. Carlson and Mrs. Douglas to represent the district on that committee. Our 3 media specialists across the district. We will be selecting a building administrator to sit on that committee and 1 classroom teacher to sit on that committee as well. So it's really the formal process for selecting media that would be new to our libraries. And then the other component of this is a review of current library media that we have in our libraries. So if a parent or a community member would have a concern about a piece of media, it outlines the process that they would go through for us to review that material. And it starts at the building level. And their first step would be to share their concern with the building level principal. Again, if you read in this policy, KSB thinks that a lot of that will be resolved at that point. If for some reason the parent or community member is not satisfied with the review of that material, then it comes to the superintendent for the final review. And that is the end of that decision by the superintendent ends the discussion. So I will tell you, and I think we've talked about this in committees, we probably talked about it last month, that this is a recommended policy from KSB. This is not a required policy. It's a recommended policy. But what we're hearing at the legislative end of things is that quite honestly, this will probably be a discussion item on the floor of the legislature starting in January, as it was last session as well. So I would venture to say that KSB believes that at some point you're going to have a required policy that outlines your process for selection and review by parents. Questions?
Just to clarify a couple things, obviously I get the review of current material if someone has a concern. With the new material, is everything going through the committee or just if there's a concern that arises with new material?
That would be anything that would be new that one of our media specialists would like to add to, say, the elementary media would go through the committee.
I mean, I think it makes sense. I mean, as you discussed, it sounds like it's kind of inevitable. Oh, well, that's true. Yeah. I'll move to approve policy 6037 as presented.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and second. Now discussion.
Now I would say that I think this makes sense. I appreciate the way it's been drafted. We hire a superintendent and our superintendent hires administrators for purposes like this. I mean, this seems like a good policy to have in place. If there is a concern, our patrons have an opportunity to address that concern without the board micromanaging what's going on in the district. So makes sense. And I think it's a well-written policy.
I think if you don't have the policy and you don't have a process in place, it makes everything pretty arbitrary. And that goes all the way down to the building level with building principals handling that maybe a little bit different, or at the level, what we do with high school media versus elementary media or even middle school for that matter. And so I think it does. Will it slow the process for getting those new items into our media areas? Maybe, but maybe it's okay to scrutinize that a little bit as well and have more eyes on it and more discussion around the table as well.
Mark.
And so this is where I disagree with the policy, because I feel like we hire librarians and they're paid, they do their job, they're members of the community. I don't think they're going to put anything in that library that wouldn't be generally approved by the public. And so I find the committee to be overkill. And I appreciate the state might force us into this policy anyway. They force us into a lot of policies. I remember that conference right when I got on the board. And, oh, we're so happy you're on the school board and doing the work. Now here's this thing we're going to force on you. And that's what the state does. But I'm going to vote against this since we're not required to do it right now. I don't think it's necessary. I think our librarians do a great job. And I don't think they're going to go outside our community standards. And I really don't like every patron can walk in. It seems weird to me. Tom, Dick, and Harry walking into our libraries and going, I don't like Oliver Twist. They're too nice to orphans. It's something weird, and you get a nice noisy minority. 5% of the people are like, we don't like Oliver Twist. And now you're like in this corner. We're like, why are we banning Oliver Twist? So I cannot see this policy going forward. I don't like it.
Yeah, I understand. And you and I have talked about that. And I fully respect your opinion on it. I really do. And I know exactly where you're coming from.
And I'd agree, Mark. I don't really like the policy, but I think the world's gotten kind of crazy. And, I think that you're going to have, you've seen some of the curriculum people that have been very frustrated with some of the stuff that's out there. And hopefully in our high school, we have materials with differing points of view and, so that people are well balanced in their education. So I think because the world's gotten so nutty right now, I think leaving it on the public to be mad at the librarians. Sorry, Dr. Rhodes, but I think we're going to let them get mad at you instead. And so that's kind of the plan, I think.
That's fine.
So I get what you're saying.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you that there's a lot of nuttiness, but I just don't want to go nutty with them.
Go nutty with them.
And
Good point.
It's also a recommendation from KSB that we should have this. And I will tell you, I didn't talk, there will be bills, a bill, at least one, possibly two or three that come up on the legislature this next January on this. And we did discuss that a bit on Friday as well. So I think this is a good policy to start with before they do tell us we have to do it.
And I think just looking at trying to do what's best for the district as a whole, protecting us and, I think we put trust in that they're going to get people that are going to do a good job of reviewing the new material. And then again, putting a lot of trust in Dr. Rhodes that if things get to his level, that he'll be able to address that. So I think it's necessary.
Okay, any other further discussion? Oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. It's good that we can disagree without getting mad and throwing things at each other,
Yeah.
That's-
Point of view makes sense.
Yeah, it does, very much. All right, roll call, Sheila.
Ivan Mitchell.
Aye.
Mark Nicholson.
Hey.
Matthew Peterson.
Aye.
Skip Altig.
Aye.
Joanne Lynn Green.
Aye.
It is approved. That was our final action item. And now I will talk about the future board calendar, which is rather full. First of all, next Monday from 10 to 2, we will have a board work session. Marcia Herring will be here. On Monday, August 29th at 5:30 PM, we will have our budget hearing. Then, that's just our hearing. Then we will have a joint budget hearing of Lincoln County on September 27th at 6 PM. And is that in the Hanson Center? Then we will meet.
Sorry, Skip, on that. If I remember correctly, that's not the entire board doesn't have to be there. We just have to have a representative. Is that right?
That actually was in the original bill.
Okay.
Yeah, we only have to have a representative there. Yeah, in the original bill, every board of all of them had to be there, of all of the. Yeah, but that will be held in the Hanson Center on September 27th at 6 PM. Then we will meet, that's a Tuesday. Then we will meet the next day, Wednesday, September 28th at 11 AM to vote on our budget, because we cannot vote on it until that hearing, the joint hearing, has been held. Plus, we're also under a time crunch, because what's the date that has to be completed by? September 30th. Yeah, right. So we have like 2 days to get everything in after this.
Becky Rossell was sort of dictated from other entities about when all counties had to have.
Well, I know, because you have to agree. Yeah, things being shoved down our throat, Mark.
The 28th is that.
Right. Then the future board calendar also, virtual candidate forum workshops for those running for the board are September 14th and October 5th. We have our area membership meeting here, NASB, on September 20th. There's a labor relations conference in Lincoln on October 5th and 6th. So if you're interested in going, you need to let Sheila know. The state education conference will be in Omaha on November 16th through the 18th. As that gets closer, you'll need to let Sheila know whether you plan to attend. And finally, the new board member workshop for those who will be elected, we will have at least one new member on our board, will be December 6th, but you don't have to be a new member. Any members can attend those workshops. And that will be held here in North Platte. And again, you'll have to let Sheila know if you plan to attend. So our August and September are pretty busy with meetings.
I think it's important to repeat and especially for our community, since that joint hearing takes the place of what normally would have been our tax request hearing. It's very important that if any of our constituents have a comment on the tax request, it has to be at that joint hearing.
Right.
Because the budget hearing is not the time to take public comment on your tax request. And so again, the joint hearing has taken the place of what was the tax request hearing. And we just want to make that clear to our public that if you're going to have public comments on the taxes that will be levied for the budget, the time to make those public comments will be at the joint hearing.
And that's for the county, correct?
That is for the county. The county will be conducting it.
Right.
But all entities that are associated that do levy that have a greater than 2% growth, which obviously North Platte Public Schools is seeing that. I would assume you'll also see it from the other school districts as well as the city will be at that so that they can have one big presentation.
Okay. All right.
I would move to adjourn at 7:01.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. Roll call, Sheila.
Mark Nicholson.
Aye.
Matthew Peterson.
Aye.
Skip Alton.
Aye.
Joanne Lynn Green.
Aye.
Ivan Mitchell.
Aye.
We are adjourned.